Welcome to the second session of PD on Your Plan. My name is Josh Flores, and I'm the Director of English Language Arts here at the Oklahoma State Department of Education in the Office of Instruction. This is session 2. We are still focused on the topic of passage-based writing instructional practices, and today's session will be recorded. It will only be 30 minutes long and will be available for review after I find time to edit all the video. Our 3 takeaways for today's session are strategies, evidence, and of course, as always, some resources. Just to recap the last session, we started off talking about what's that first step into passage-based writing. And the first step, of course, is to comprehend what you read. And we looked at this guy by the name of Marzano, little known guy, did some research on comprehension. And we discussed the most basic skill for demonstrated comprehension is summarization. We're going to focus on today and build off of that because one of the key aspects was to focus on important details. So we are going to look into that by first sharing some strategies. So I like any strategy that incorporates all aspects of the brain, these 4 corners specifically. I tell my students when I show them this brain slide, I want your brain to light up in class. This will be the areas worked in the brain whenever they hear words, see words, speak words, and generate words. So once we do that cycle, at least every single lesson that we give them, they are in pretty good shape and they'll leave exhausted because they'll have used their brains so much in your class, and that's a good thing. So some strategies to get them to each of those aspects are the following. They're acronyms, of course, because we're educators and we love acronyms for everything and have no problems keeping track of those. But if you're unfamiliar with these particular acronyms, I do have them detailed out in my Evernote notebook that you can access if you downloaded the handout on our ELA OK website. It's under materials. There's a link, that first link underneath it says Josh's Evernote Notebook of Instructional Practices or something along those lines. SWBS stands for Somebody Wanted But So, great for fiction. GIST, I don't know what the acronym stands for, but I know what a GIST is. A GIST is a 1-sentence summary written in exactly 20 words. It drives students crazy. It's a lot of fun. And JABS stands for Judgment, Authority, Basis, and, of course, Summary. You can switch it out for stance too at the end. Stance, JABS. Great for argument texts, not just getting in an argument, but arguing, looking at an argument on text, not actual JABS. But APE stands for Answer It, Prove It, and Explain It. That's what I just learned about on Twitter last night. The JABS and the APE techniques, which are both focused on looking at evidence, which is our topic for today. So what is it? Where is it? What types of evidence are there? And how do we get evidence? And let's go through what evidence is. I think it's always important to give students a very clear definition of what all these terms are. And I'm taking this definition out of Marley Springer's book, Teaching the Critical Vocabulary. And it's based on Common Core, but really, who cares? Even with or without Common Core, this is a great resource of some vocabulary words with instructional practices that really help students get to those critical thinking levels. A lot of comprehensive processes. Processes. Evidence is essentially details that support an opinion, an argument, a belief, a judgment of some sort. And I think that's very important to distinguish that it is different than just details from a text. Evidence is different. It's a detail has the ability to evolve into evidence once it supports a belief or a judgment. It's a lot like Pokemon. You start out with like a Pikachu and then it evolves into a Raichu. Well, you start out with a detail, and once it finds its connecting support or connecting claim that it's supporting, it evolves into evidence. We know that not all summaries are created equal. Not all evidences are created equal. So we have this cartoon here that I like to use with students just to kind of get the idea across. And I ask them, what's the claim and what's the evidence supporting that claim? So we have a really good claim. What's his evidence? They just are, and that's all there is to it. That's weak. That's weak evidence, especially when there are so many reasons why dogs are superior to cats. As listed in this diagram here. You have evidence here, 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 and here. And I like doing an activity with students where I have them actually take each of the evidences listed here and put them in a list from strongest to weakest, and then explain why. Why did you choose this to be the strongest of all the evidences? And they'll pull from maybe their personal experience or their own thoughts, and at least gets them in that mode they need to be in to think critically about evidence. Evidence is not created equal. There is weak support, weak evidence, and there's strong, very strong, stable evidence. So where do I get evidence? Do I go to Walmart and just go down aisle 4? No. There's a couple ways to get evidence. First, students can gather it, or students can experience it. Gather it by, of course, reading a text, or maybe even doing a survey. And we're going to talk about a couple of activities we can do in class that will help us gather evidence. But also students can build off their personal experience or use that as a basis to provide evidence to prompt or claim. It's also key to understand that it's not always explicit in the text. So that's why we need some strategy, some type of practical strategy to go in and dig through all the details to find the evidence when it's not explicit. So it's like jumping in a ball pit and you got to find all the yellows, or you got to find all the reds, because those are the details that are going to specifically connect to your claim. This is a ball pit with Sir Patrick Stewart. It's not weird. It's Sir Patrick Stewart. He's Captain Picard. Nothing creepy about that. But you're jumping into the text like you jump into a ball pit, and you're looking for something very specific. Let's talk about how they find evidence. How do they find strong evidence? And for our skill for this, just as our skill in the first session was summarization, our skill in this session is inferencing. They're going to practice inferring based on the text. And our practical technique is called ESP. And I'm not talking about Miss Chloe type ESP. That's ridiculous. I'm talking about Sherlock Holmes ESP. I think he's like UK's sexiest man alive, but he looks like a real dork to me. Either way, it's a good show. So, of course, step one is to get a Sherlock Holmes hat, which I happen to have one. And if you don't have one, you can always go find one at 221B Baker Street and pick one up for yourself or your students. And the second step is to gather details for each of these three categories. ESP stands for events, setting, and people that you're reading about. And here's two good reflection questions for the students to practice. What happened before? And what could happen next? Then move on and collect some details about the setting. What does the setting look like? And of course, connect it to some of your outside personal experience by asking what happens in similar places. Next, focus on the people in the nonfiction text, or characters in the fictional text. Describe what situation are they in, and what did they do? How did they handle that situation? You have all these details nice and listed, and then you're ready to really find what is the critical evidence and be able to infer based on that. So in your packet now, we'll have 3 handouts. One is called Evidence Within Fiction 1, Evidence Within Fiction 2, and Evidence Within Nonfiction. Evidence Within Fiction 1 is a very easy handout using a kindergarten level text. Evidence Within Fiction 2 is a more challenging handout using a high school text. And Evidence Within Nonfiction is a nonfiction article taken off a resource I shared last episode called newsela.com. Newsela.com, for those of you who haven't seen it, they have a bunch of information on nonfiction text with adjustable leg styles. So the one in this handout is actually at a 3rd grade reading level, but you can pump it up all the way to a high school reading level. So you can use it in a wide range of grade levels. This is where this part of the website comes in. You'll scroll down to the interact phase. It's Prove It or Lose It, everybody's favorite game show. So students could read through the passage using ESP, and then they should have all the details necessary to respond to each of the prompts using evidence from the text. But just as a practice, just to show you how this works, you're going to go here and click that submit button down there at the bottom. Scroll back up, get that confirmation box, and you put your input. I thank you for it, and you can submit another response, so then you can keep on doing the same, answering the prompts to the next 2 passages, the fiction number 2 and the nonfiction passage. But you can also look at the responses from everyone else that has participated. Students might have more than one correct answer for the next prompt, Dr. Heidegger's experiment. Now this is totally opposite end of the spectrum. This is a high school text. It's an excerpt from Dr. Heidegger's experiment by Nathaniel Hawthorne. And it is one of my favorite passages. It's the passage where it describes his study. And it's very detailed and it's very eerie. But the prompt is, does the description of Dr. Heidegger's study provide credibility or discredit him as a doctor? So I'm asking students to not only make a claim, but provide evidence taken from the details of just his study. So we're not even describing necessarily Dr. Heidegger, but based on the objects within this study, we can infer quite a bit about this man. And that's a skill being practiced on this excerpt. So that kind of brings us to our nonfiction text that you can practice with students. Our nonfiction text here has to do with, it's a science text essentially, and has to do with a very pressing question: is the abominable snowman real? Once again, they have to commit to a claim, and then they would use the article looking for evidence that will support whether he does or does not exist. Now, there's a couple ways to do this too. I'll share some other strategies. You could do this activity before or after you read the article, where they would have to commit to one side or the other, whether they want to believe that the abominable snowman does exist or does not exist. And this is where I would bring in my favorite teaching tool, sticky notes, and have them read the text, in their own words, paraphrase one of the evidences that support whether he does or does not, and then come up to the board and vote. See where they lie. Because the evidence here is up for interpretation, essentially. It could show that, oh, well, yeah, that could be abominable snowman, or nope, that is not abominable snowman. Depends on their take, on their interpretation of that evidence. Another way to do it, this is a bit more extensive because it actually asks them to write out their claim instead of having one being provided for them. So their claim would be whether he does or does not exist. And the students can come up and vote on that too if you want to do it over board, or maybe you just want them to do this in their own notebooks. So he doesn't, he does. But then they also have to follow it up with all the reasons why they think their claim. And then also, once again, provide the proof straight from the text. Before in my reach sessions, I like providing students with some sort of a skeleton framework for them to fill in their ideas if they're really struggling. If they're really struggling writers, but I know they want to participate in class, I'll give them some sort of framework to put their ideas in. So for instance, in this one, it has the blank followed by the word exists. So they would say, the abominable snowman does exist or does not exist. And then they finish with thought, I think this is true because. Finish with their own thoughts and interpretations, and also include blanks to put in evidence from the text that they determine that this is evidence that aligns with their. Before I close up, we talk about these resources here. I got like a lot more than compared to the last session. So first off, the handouts and some of those ideas came straight from Teaching Challenging Texts by Lawrence Baines and Jane Fisher. It's this booklet right here. One aspect of the book that I really liked was the simple question, challenging question that they have for each of the lessons in here. I get this asked a lot. Hey, what is just a resource of just lesson plans? I need a book of lesson plans that I can just follow step by step. This book is really awesome. It has middle school and high school lessons that start out really low level, but you can extend them and gives a lot of options to make them very advanced too. So you can hit a variety of different learners. It talks a lot about struggling readers too, and just getting students engaged in general. It has a ton of handouts that are just ready for you to copy and use, and the lessons are all very well structured and easy to follow, and you can even blend the structure of the framework with some of the readings that you do in class. The articles here, I just took the strategies and used some of my own articles that I like teaching in class. Teaching the Critical Vocabulary. Common Core or Not, it was a great book of just a bunch of process skills that students need to do critical thinking. So that is by Marley Sprenger. The two texts today, Frog and Toad Together, that comes straight from the Appendix B of the state standards. Appendix B is just full of grade level aligned exemplars, and so I just pulled it straight from that. And Nathaniel Heidegger, or Dr. Heidegger from Nathaniel Hawthorne, that is from Project Gutenberg. If you haven't seen Project Gutenberg, it's just a big database of free literature, classic lit too. And then of course the evidence within nonfiction, once again, that's taken from newsela.com, one of my new favorite resources, also free. Another resource I didn't have time to get to today, but I think is probably beneficial and you can use all these strategies with, is the Literacy Shed. It's a literacy shed, but it's full of multimedia videos that this teacher has been collecting. And he or she has lots of good guiding questions, so she'll guide you, and he or she will guide you to play a video and stop at certain points in the video, present a question to elicit a lot of critical thinking from the students. Other than that, that's it for this session. I hope to see you next month. As always, your feedback is really necessary, so I hope you will respond and give me some feedback about today. Until then, stay in touch and take care of your students, take care of yourself, and take care of each other. I'll see you later. Let's look at what it is. Some of these definitions here are taken. This balls were just hanging. I don't know how that happened. Okay.